examples can enhance the teaching of cross-country examples can enhance the teaching of economics. Among all of the subjects that we teach, among all of the subjects that I teach, economics is one of those subjects that provides a link or a bridge between the vast majority of places that we are based at. For example, we often teach that we live in a world of globalization. Or the other way, touched global collaboration and cross-country examples when it comes to teaching economics, and we'll do so in this panel. So we'll focus on integrating real-world applications using cross-country examples and fostering a global mindset among students and teachers. As far as we are concerned, this theme aligns perfectly with the NEC's vision. The NEC's vision, insofar as all of our activities are concerned, aims to spark students' interest in economics through diverse study projects, real-world experiences, and peer-to-peer collaboration. The NEC brings together a lot of students from different countries, but it's for the first time that we are trying to bring together teachers from different countries. And by encouraging this kind of cross-country collaboration, data analysis, critical thinking, and rational decision-making, the NEC aims to empower students to tackle real-world problems. And at the forefront of this mission are us. What I mean is teachers, because we are the ones who impart that instruction to students in order for them to apply their knowledge in real life. So as educators, we are dedicated to supporting students in building economic thinking by improving teaching methods, educational tools, and expanding teaching resources. All right. Now, to that end, I would like to introduce to our audience 5 experienced educators from China, the United States, South Africa, India, and the UK that we have gathered to share their experiences. Our first panelist is Ms. Candy Ma from China. She is the head of senior school and an A-level IBDP economics teacher and examiner at Hangzhou DuPont School of Arts and Sciences. Ms. Ma, we are very happy to have you on the panel today. Our second panelist is Dr. Stephen Day from the United States. Dr. Day is an associate professor and director of Virginia Commonwealth University Center for Economics Education. He is also the chair of Virginia Jumpstart Coalition and an esteemed awardee of the 2024 Economics Pedagogy Scholar Award recipient. Dr. Day, we would like to welcome you for perhaps your first panel discussion among audiences in China.
No, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
We are happy to have you. Our third panelist is Mr. Solomon from South Africa. He is the principal and an economics educator at the Academy of Science and Technology. In 2016, he won the Global Best Teachers Award. He was a competitor at the Global Best Teachers Award in teaching economics, and he has authored several books and resources in teaching economics, especially in the South African context. Mr. Solomon, we are very pleased to have you today.
Thank you very much. I'm also happy to be part of it.
Our fourth panelist is actually from the same country that I'm from, Ms. Neha Bansal. She is a postgraduate teacher in economics and an examination head at a renowned international school called Ridge Valley School in India. And she has been teaching economics throughout all grade levels from grade 9 to grade 12 for the last 12 years. Ms. Neha, it's our pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you for having me here.
And our final panelist is from the United Kingdom. It's our pleasure to have Zamzam Abdi, an economics teacher and a business teacher with more than 2 years of experience teaching in the United Kingdom. Zamzam, we are very happy to have you.
Hi, everyone. It's very nice to meet you all. Clearly, there's lots of great panelists. I'm only in my 3rd year of teaching, but it's great to be here.
as far as we are concerned, experience matters, but experience doesn't equal expertise, and we have a lot to learn from you as well. So we'll get this discussion started. At the beginning, we have budgeted some time for the panelists to introduce themselves and in this context, talk about their experiences. So I'd begin with the first question, and we'll see where the discussion goes from there. I would like all of our panelists to briefly describe their teaching background and primarily focus on how economics as a subject is approached in taught in your respective countries. We can begin with Dr. Stephen.
Well, in the United States, the everything as you may know is policy is done state by state. Each of the 50 states has a different policy for how economics is going to be taught. And things change a lot. So there were a lot of economics classes that came during the Cold War, and they were supposed to learn a lot about systems, capitalism and socialism. But since there's no Soviet Union anymore, I feel like there's less urgency nowadays to talk about economic systems, and economics teaching in the high school level, I think, has shifted more towards personal choice making and understanding the world around you. Oh, excuse me, clear my throat. There's also one thing that's interesting about teaching economics in the United States is that it sort of competes and is helped by at the same time personal finance classes. So there's a lot of question about how much should students learn about supply and demand versus how much should students be learning about things that are relevant to their own personal money. So clearly the things that are more relevant for international connections are going to be more the economic side. And there's still there's some economics topics that lend themselves immediately to cross-country connections like comparative advantage and gains from trade and things like that. So we teach those at the very, very beginning, and then expand those to cross-country teaching. But I'd say that as far as lesson plans go and what teachers teach in classrooms, I think that there um, there are a lot of lesson plans about international connections. And then as far as person-to-person connections, it's less, but there are some. So, for example, I'm on the Global Economics Educators Alliance, which is a small nonprofit that seeks to connect teachers from different countries. And we do teacher study tours. Well, connect American teachers to teachers in Finland or the Baltic states, or I'm taking a trip to Tanzania in Southeast Africa this summer. And then I'm also on the international committee for the National Association of Economics Educators. And this used to be the committee tasked with seeing a bunch more cross-country collaborations, but has lost government money in the last 15 years. And so those efforts are smaller than they used to be. But in some, there's many cross-country collaborations available person to person in the curriculum, in the standards. And it's really worthwhile continuing to pursue these things because they make our economics teaching better.
Thank you, Dr. Stephen, for that that analysis, which was very much grounded in history. That it's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you ask me?
Collaboration.
Oh,
Come again?
oh, I'm sorry. My computer froze. I thought you had asked me a question. Please go on.
I mentioned that. Thank you for that example and how economics teaching has shifted from systems to personal choices. It's a nice tidbit of history that I did not know before.
Yeah, you see it a lot. There's a lot of pressure to make the classes based about personal finance.
How economics is taught in China? Miss Candy, can you hear me? Did I break off there for a second?
Yes, I can hear you. I would like to share some of my experience because I think I mainly taught in China, and then I had some experience of teaching in Romania. Um, I I just want to say that the differences in different country, the best topic to address is about the government policies, either is micro or macro. Um, I think I remembered one of the example I used when I was teaching in Romania. The students are very interested in how government policy has done in China comparing to the government policy has done in Romania in terms of correcting market failures. For example, when we talk about there's negative externality, how government going to address the negative externality using taxes, regulations, and government regulations. So in those areas, students have a lot of topic. They can find different examples to looking at from different angle. In addition, that when students are studying in different syllabus, for example, A level and IB, for IB students will be looking at the IA internal assessment because market failure is one of the most popular topic in IA. Most kids will choose it. So in terms of how students can choose the topic to write in IA in that particular policy, students normally I think I found one thing which I use is very useful is you can ask the students, for example, if we are looking at reduce negative externality, pollution, students can come up with a variety of different examples, how different country to address the pollution to reduce negative consumption of demerit goods like a cigarette, petrol. So they can have a variety of different examples from different countries to show a comparison. After those comparison analysis, you can look at the effectiveness of policy. So this actually is a very good way for students to have a better understanding of how different country example, government had a different policy, can bring in together to show a comparison in terms of evaluation. Again, this can also be used when we do A-level AC question because market failure is a very popular 20-mark AC question. I remember when I was teaching A2. So if students understand from different country using a real-life example to make a comparison to show the effectiveness of easy policy, that can actually give them a better insight into the topic. In terms of collaboration, I had one example which I in my previous year when I worked at 1949 school, we had a collaboration with a school in the United States. Again, we focus on policy, how the policy has implemented in China compared to the policy implemented in the US, how they address differently. Students has different insights. So this again is very good topic for students to develop global mindset. So based on the discussion between different schools, they can come up with lots of different ideas. This can give them a better understanding that learning economics is not only focused on your own country, but is going to be go across the different country, including other countries. So it's very good that we can maybe we can work out some collaboration project between different schools. Also, I remember that when I was in Romania, we did another collaboration between teachers in terms of, I think it's IEO competition and WEC competition. I think it's from the competition, the organizer organized several teachers from different countries to teach different topic and give students the insight that the teacher come from different country, but they're teaching a similar topic. So again, this can help students understand much better. So the networking is another important way that we can, if we can find a way to create a network between teachers or between school, that again can help teachers to develop a better understanding from different perspectives and different angles.
So, Miss Candy, if I were to conclude, would it be sufficient to say that one of the most common topics in which we can include cross-country examples is government policy, because we can give examples of diverse policies, uh, quite different from what students are experienced in their home countries.
Yes, yes.
So this is quite an interesting example, because one of the common topics, if I can add, one of the common topics we study in macro is government transfers. So one of the best discussions I have had in class was on the topic of conditional cash transfers in Mexico, where people get cash in their bank accounts conditional on children going to school and other activities. And that idea was very interesting to some of my students, because cash transfers are not that common or preferred of a government policy in China to begin with. So that was a very interesting example that got a lot of meaningful discussion, especially when we were talking about birth rates
Yes.
in China. So moving ahead, I would pose the same question to Dr. Solomon. If you could talk about how or what kind of varied examples do you use in teaching economics in the South African context?
Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. Here in South Africa, also, I'm fortunate to have been a teacher in Ghana. I'm originally from Ghana, and I've been working in South Africa for the past 20 years. When you come to South Africa, I'm just gonna swing between Ghana and South Africa, so that at least as we thinking and bringing resources together, at least we will have different perspectives. Here in South Africa, what I've seen is that South Africa was a bit introvert in terms of its everything, because if you can trace the history of South Africa before 1994, South Africa was not known to the world that much, and just closer to 1994, the apartheid government, was under sanctions. So after they gained independence in 1994, they restructured everything in the economy. So when it comes to teaching and learning of economics, we're trying to put South Africa in the world. So in terms of macroeconomics here in South Africa, we look at things like international trade, globalization, and also when we come to other factors such as contemporary socioeconomic issues, then we look at things like inflation. Inflation is one of the things that we look more into here in South Africa as we're trying to link up with the rest of the world. We also look at tourism and the effects of tourism, both positive and negative effects of tourism. Don't forget, here in South Africa, most of the things that we look at is the things that will help South Africa to rebound back to catch up to the rest of the world. So we look at tourism also when it comes to this contemporary socioeconomic issues. And we've got environmental sustainability also. Don't forget these days, when we talk about the environment, I'm sure those of you closer to China, you come to terms with me that the environment's under pressure. So we also look into that, how to sustain the environment and some of the ways of sustaining the environment. Also here in South Africa, what can we do to help the rest of the world to sustain the environment? When we come to microeconomics also, we deal with the microeconomic concepts, and then some of the things that we can talk about there are the graphs. When you come to microeconomics, then we're talking about graphs, such as when we come to perfect competition. In perfect competitions, we deal with all of them. One thing that I've done, whenever I get a chance to link up with the rest of the world, one thing that I've tried to do is to help teachers in terms of teaching the graphs. The graphs become boring. It's not only here in South Africa, I suppose. Even in Ghana, the learners don't like graphs. So what I have tried to do is that I've developed some strategies to help teach graphs so that the learners don't get bored. and also to make the learners to enjoy the graphs. Like microeconomics, when it comes to microeconomics, graphs like perfect competition, I've developed the belt system. I've also developed let's go to the pool system, let's eat sweet system. These are all the pedagogical skills that we use to catch the learners in terms of graphs. Another thing that I've realized is that when it comes to the difference between perfect competition and imperfect competition, especially when it comes to monopolies and the perfect competition, when they get the graphs, as perfect competition, most of the graphs, we talk about the horizontal demand curve of the perfect competitor. But now when it comes to monopolies, then the demand curve is becoming the original or the normal demand curve that we know that slopes downward from left to right. Then they get confused. So these are some of the things that we have developed here in South Africa to help. Apart from all these, in South Africa has got its own growth and development policies that we infuse into economics. They've got their IDZs, industrial development zones, the sector economic development zone. So we infuse all those things. But in our teaching, we try to link up to the rest of the world, like talking about China, for instance. We've got a lot of Chinese over here, and we give examples of how Chinese economy was structured and how we can use also and learn from that to structure and restructure the economy of South Africa. So this is how we do things here in South Africa in terms of economics.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Solomon.
Thank you, sir.
My experience has been that the African context is one of the most misunderstood when it comes to teaching economics, at least when it comes to my students. A lot of examples come naturally to them, but the African context is often misunderstood. So we definitely need more resources in that area. So
wonderful.
We'll move on to our next panelist from India with the same question. Neha, if you could talk about your experience teaching economics in India and cross-country examples often used in the classroom.
Good evening, everyone. My studies as well as my entire career has been in India. So if we talk about my teaching experience, all of my examples, not all, most of them would be related to Indian economy. If we talk about how do we approach to teaching economics in India, so in India we primarily use the application-based pedagogy, which transforms the classrooms into very inquiry-based and very engaged in that sense. So when we integrate the theoretical knowledge with the practical knowledge as well as the real world examples, so the students in India basically develop their skills that prepare them for understanding the situations which are happening around them, especially if we talk about the economy of India. Now, the cultural and or the policy specific factors that we were asked that influence our teaching. So, if I may talk about the Indian economy basically has a diversity in socio-economic sense. So, the topics like unemployment or informal sector, they resonate deeply due to their prevalence, of course, in India. So, while teaching the practical examples like the rural employment schemes or the schemes that would alleviate the poverty in India, that these concepts basically are used to highlight the topics like labor market dynamics or the poverty traps in India. Other than that, India is also the agricultural based economy. So agriculture forms a very significant part of the GDP of and of course the employment of India. So the concepts like price floor or subsidies, they can be taught using the examples like minimum support price in agriculture or public distribution system here. One more example that I can quote about the economic reforms of 1991. The economic reforms of 1991 serve as a cornerstone example, I would say, for topics like trade policies or FDIs or exchange rates. Apart from that, the government policies, various government policies like Atmanirbhar Bharat or Digital India. These policies are linked to the concepts like public goods or market failure or developmental economies. If I talk about, let's say, the factors that would affect my teaching in Indian classroom, basically Indian classroom is diverse in terms of its disparity in social as well as the economic parameter. So we need to actually consider, that we have an inclusive classroom that promotes the inclusivity, rather than we perpetuate the stereotypes in our country.
Thank you, Neha. Uh, That was a very interesting example because even though I taught in China for a very long time, I very rarely considered the socioeconomic makeup of my class. It's just never been a factor that I would consider in designing learning experiences. So that is very interesting. It's an added layer of complexity to teaching. So for the same question, we will finish with our last panelist, Ms. Zamzam.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
You might be, so in the UK, we teach A-levels. I teach A-level Edexcel, the exam board. So in terms of economics has been taught in schools for quite some time in the UK. We do GCSE, so between ages 14 and 16. However, not a lot of schools do that because they focus on the main curriculum. But it is a quite popular subject for students who are doing A-level. So that's the ages between 16 and 18. And usually those who take A-level economics are usually interested in economics or politics in university. So they want to further study in university. Similar to the panelists before me, we share similar topics. So for A-levels, we split into 4 themes. We look at micro and macro. So for example, in year 12, we look at markets and market failure. And for theme 2, we look at specifically UK performance. So UK unemployment, UK inflation, how is that? And then in theme 3, I guess it's a much more wider perspective. We look at more in detail about business, how businesses run, the cost curves, revenue curves, labor market. And then theme 4 is where it's the global markets, globalization. And I guess throughout, when it comes to looking at businesses, we look at businesses across different countries. So for example, I just finished teaching theme 3. And we were looking at the smartphone industry, housing an oligopoly market. And of course, within smartphone industry, for example, there's a lot of businesses, for example, Apple from the US and Samsung from South Korea. So there's a lot of competitors entering the market. So we look at different businesses from different countries. How I get these students to be more interested in news, to get them to read further, to help them prepare themselves for university as well as the exams. Because in exams, they need to add in their own examples, is I make them do compulsory reading. So they've got separate writing book and they go off. There's a really good website that I could link in that has great news articles for economic students. And they go away, read through the article, summarize and link it to different topics that they've learnt. So in that sense, that helps them think about how do, for example, as the previous panelists talked about, how do different policies look like in different countries, what are different things going on in different countries that may affect the economy, because of globalization, how does the effect of those companies, so for example, for us in the UK, our fuel prices went up because of the Russia-Ukraine war. And I feel like that helped cultivate curiosity, and then we talk about it in class. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Zamzam. Uh, on that note, I thought of an example. Uh, some of our teachers might know that we have badminton is very popular in China, and a couple of months back, there was a sudden increase in the price of shuttlecocks that you use to play badminton. And the reason for that increase in price had nothing to do with badminton itself. It was because of the decreasing price of pork.
Oh.
Because since pork became cheaper, more people switched to that meat instead of duck. That led to a critical shortage of duck feathers and an increase in the price of shuttlecocks. So, beautiful linkage. But moving forward, uh, because we all have experiences in different countries, and the vast majority of our audience is from China, if I could ask you if there is one example from your respective countries that is so important in economics teaching that it must be included in every curriculum, what example would that be? It could be a policy, it could be an event, it could be any example or any case study that you, as an educator, recommend in any curriculum in any country. So we can go in the same order. We'll begin with Dr. Stephen. If there is something that you would highly recommend all of our teachers to include in their curriculum.
Well, I think that if it involves China, then the obvious answer has to be China's importance in manufacturing, in global manufacturing. I mean, you can't really come up with an international, well, you can't talk about international economics comprehensively or give examples in it comprehensively without talking about Chinese manufacturing. So when I was a kid, our example for trading partners with the United States was Japan. And then it changed to China, and it's been China for a while. Maybe it'll be India soon. But I one thing that people are really concerned about in the United States is labor standards. Um, and so the question is always like, should I buy things that are made in America? Some things have a little tag that says made in America on them, and this is attractive to some consumers. And so it's good for economics teachers to ask this question, like, should I buy made in America things? How does this affect the economy? And you can use that as a way to teach about comparative advantage and trade. I made a lesson. So I try to do inquiry-based teaching. I teach my lessons based on a question. And sometimes there's sort of punchy questions meant to provoke conversation. So I made a lesson that's published online called Should I Join the Sweatshop Boycott? And I say, so you are a student at your school and somebody comes and someone sends you a message through social media that says, there are these products we are not going to buy because they're made in a country that has that where the labor standards aren't well protected, and we don't actually use China as an example. I use a report from um, Colombia and Bangladesh, a news report, and we say, so should we buy these t-shirts that are made from there or not? And then they have to study um, per capita GDP in different countries, um, industrialization, development economics. They have to study comparative advantage. And this is all leading them to answer this question of, would it be a wise thing for me to say no to this product? The one thing that source that we have to study that's really interesting is a series of letters that were written by young women working in textile mills, making clothes, but it's in different times in history. So this chapter is called Sisters in Time, and it shows how the textile mills have sort of gone from country to country over time as industrialization has proceeded. So, for example, you see my students will read a letter from a young woman working at a garment factory in New England, in New York or in Boston in 1860, I think, or 1870. And then another letter from a young woman working in a North Carolina mill in 1890. and then a young woman working in China in 1990, and then a different young woman who's working in a Vietnamese factory in 2010. And so you see how the factories sort of move, and you get to hear with these young women's own voices why they're working in the factory, what caused them to leave the farm, and things like that, which I think is a neat addition because so much time in economics, we do the graph, we do the model, we say this is why people are doing what they're doing. So it added some good color to the lesson to say, well, how about we ask them and see exactly what the people who are working in the factories say why they're doing it. And so you can find this lesson, by the way, on econedlink.org. I could drop it in the chat, but it's a good way to have your students consider sources and pursue a question while they learn their economics.
All right, Stephen, Dr. Stephen, that was a very, very illuminating example, especially the activity that you just described. Out of curiosity, and I'm pretty sure some of our teachers might have the same question. Do you notice a difference in student responses before and after they have researched this topic? For example, are they more enthusiastic, we should boycott, before they have done their research, and after that, are they less enthusiastic and more sympathetic? Or do you notice any kind of differences that we can use to reflect?
Uh, the stronger students are the ones who change their opinion the most, or the ones who give the most thoughtful answers. I think some, and then yeah, I think so. There's a change. There's an effect size, but it's not with every student. Some students kind of learn the material and say, well, I just want to do what seems nice. So sometimes they're not very analytical. But yeah, the lesson has an effect for sure. This lesson, by the way, is part of the ethics, economics, and social issues curriculum that the Council for Economic Education put out recently. So the whole curriculum is driven by these sort of compelling questions. I can put that in the link too, if they're not all international based, but they are inquiry based. Thank
Uh,
you.
teaching materials from the Council of Economics Education is actually quite popular in teaching circles in China. If the name might ring a bell, last year we hosted Dr. Rubin, who works for the Council of Economics Education and on NEC's in national activities. Moving ahead, uh, we I'll pose the same question to the rest of our panelists, beginning with Ms. Candy. The question was, if we could use our respective experience in countries as an example to propose for teachers in China, if there is one thing that they should definitely include it in their curriculum, what would that topic or policy or case study be?
I will definitely go with China's infrastructure. The way how China has invested in infrastructure over the recent years has boosted a huge economic growth in China. And this is very different from every country outside China. Particularly when I see when I see how governments spend the money outside China, for example, in Europe, you will see that China's infrastructure, particularly the highway, speed train, in terms of transportation, and also the internet has really developed really fast, and that is really one of the example that we can use to discuss how government should spend the money, and whether what are the effectiveness the government spending. And this is a really interesting topic, and also could also help boosting students' understanding from government spending money, whether infrastructure is a very basic necessity that every country should do it, or how much money they should have spent into infrastructure to boost the country development. That is one topic I think would be really interesting for every curriculum to have a discussion on this.
All right, Miss Candy. I could see Neha taking notes there, because infrastructure development is such a burning topic in India as well these days. So I'd move to Neha because I can very clearly see she has a lot to add on it or add her own topics.
Well, I would like to tell the I mean, I would like to answer the question that you just posed, that what topic from or what case study from my country I would like to um, propose to be included in every curriculum. So that my answer would be the role of UPI in financial inclusion in India. So I mean, that has been a transforming move by the Indian government in 2016, wherein the UPI was launched, and that became India's payment system for enabling the instant, low cost, and real time bank transfers through your mobile devices. By 2024, UPI processes over 10 billion transactions monthly, which covers the rural as well as the urban users. Now it has actually, drastically reduced the cost, or you can say the fees for smaller transaction, and that has also eliminated the intermediaries for many payments. That has promoted the financial inclusion in the entire country, especially the people with uh, I mean, the people who used to have no bank accounts. So bank accounts are not necessary for it. So even if you have, the money in your wallet, you can easily make payments. And that has also empowered women as well as the rural communities with obviously the digital access. So this is something that I very proudly tell to my students, and I would also, like to just request everyone to include in their lectures as well, because it is a very very transforming and nice case study according to me from India.
All right. Thank you, Neha. Just to provide our audience with some context, UPI is Unified Payments Interface. It facilitates financial transactions on mobile phones. So we are all used to seeing, in China at least, we are all used to seeing QR codes everywhere for the smallest payments to the largest payments. UPI has done that for India. And I use it as an example in my class, but our discussion is primarily to see the different reasons for development, where we give examples of how mobile payments in China are primarily developed by the private sector, WeChat and Alipay, and the government in the beginning had minimal influence in all this was to ease transactions. It was primarily private sector led. But in India, the the proliferation of mobile payments and nowadays the situation is very similar to China, as in you see QR codes everywhere. It is very much led by the central bank and the government and those financial inclusion efforts. So we use it as an example to show how you have different stakeholders leading to very similar outcomes. Moving ahead, Mr. Solomon, again, if there is one topic or example that you would like to add from the African context that should be used by teachers, our audience in China, what would that example or policy be?
Yeah, if I would be given the chance to bring this to the fore, I will go for international trade and terms of trade, for instance. Because when I look at China, I could see China is now developing at a very great arithmetic rate, and I have not been in China before. I'm yet to visit China, but one thing that I'm made to understand is that when we talk about natural resources, Africa has got almost everything. Talk about gold, we've got it in abundance here. But the problem with the African continent is that we cannot convert our natural resources to consumable products. So Africa, for instance, South Africa, Ghana, and other African countries rely on China greatly for the conversion of natural resources like gold to jewelries and all those things. So what I will just bring to the fore to the Chinese educators is that they should just infuse this. For instance, if China want to develop up to a certain point in terms of industrialization and manufacturing process, what are they supposed to do in terms of things that they do not have? Then now we go into our terms of trade. Meeting a country like South Africa or Ghana, they've got gold, they've got it in abundance. In fact, the whole continent of Africa is resting on gold. So how can we exchange gold for technology? And in terms of our natural resources, as much as we've got enough of natural resources, we're not developed up to the point of China. We see China is highly developed. They are just growing. Every day you see that there's a new change in China. How can we exchange natural resources with technology? So the Chinese government is supposed to meet the African government so that we exchange what do you call it, natural resources for technology from that side. And also when it comes to globalization and its effects on African continent, for instance, how can we help each other? I'm just looking at the time. I could see that the time is just against me. So I would take terms of trade and how we can use that to develop the country, China.
Got it. Thank you, Dr. Solomon. We'll quickly move on to our next panelist so that we can take the discussion forward. Ms. Zamzam, if there is one example from the UK that you feel should be included in economics curriculum in China, what would that be?
Hi, yes. A big topic that we look at is the Great Depression and the financial crisis in 2008, especially because countries are interdependent, the role of the bank, how to protect the economy from a possible financial crash, and if it does happen, what are the policies to try and get the economy back up again. So we currently, in our curriculum, we look at the US and the UK, but for China, they can also look at the Chinese economy during the Great Depression and the financial crisis 2008, and comparing the three case studies of how each three governments handled it differently, and what was the impact of those policies that they've done. So I feel like that would be an interesting topic if they don't already look at it. I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah, those kind of cross-country policy comparisons are very interesting. One of the themes that I noticed in almost all responses was interdependence. How we want to teach that we live in a world where we are interdependent. One of the activities I often use is called supply chain mapping, where we let students choose one product of their choice. It could be anything. The vast majority of my students, I think other teachers might have similar experiences, really love shoes, designer shoes and sneakers for some reason. So they end up choosing shoes or an iPhone or any of those things. And then the instructions, I ask students to go to, let's say, Apple's website, see what goes into the iPhone, break it down into parts. Where are these parts sourced from? And then I give them a map on a cardboard piece. And they are supposed to put thumbtacks or pins in those countries where parts originate, and then take a thread to wherever the assembly happens. So we always see a map where you have parts coming from all over the world, and every thread is leading to China, because that's where the final manufacturing is happening. And it helps us teach that, if you see the supply chain of a product, you can very clearly see that you have resources being sourced from all over the world, and they are being manufactured in like China and elsewhere. And we also see a lot of natural resources go from China to other countries. And when they draw these threads, they see that trade is not as one-sided as they thought it was. And
Sorry about that. We may have some, yes.
Can
Oh, I
everybody
see
hear
it.
me?
You
We
cut out
lost you
for
for a sec. Yeah.
you cut out for a
I'm
little
sorry,
bit.
I lost you there for a second. So I'd wrap up this activity. We call it supply chain mapping, and it ends up with students having like a very nice map with a lot of thread going around, and it helps them see supply chains in real life. It helps them see that the global economy is not as one-sided as we think it is. We see a lot of manufacturing moving into China, but we also see a lot of resources, a lot of imports, a lot of resources moving out of China to other countries for manufacturing. It helps me bring out comparative advantage. I can share the document of this activity after the panel discussion, but it's a very good way of getting students, working uh, with working with resources and working in groups. So this was a very interesting initial discussion that we had on cross-country examples. Now, another common challenge that we have in teaching economics in China, well, student mindset is a very broad way of putting it, but a common challenge that we have is that, first of all, a lot of economics instruction is very test heavy, but beyond that, we understand economics to be a field which in which economies are truly interdependent, but we have a challenge of making our students take studying economics a global mindset. We are challenged in getting our students to think about issues from a global interconnectedness perspective rather than a local perspective. For example, I still get questions like, if we are amazing at manufacturing everything, we are really not scared of tariffs at all because we can do everything in house. And well, we should have reciprocal tariffs because we approach trade from a position of strength, not weakness. So, as teachers, my next question to us this panel is, how do we use these cross-country perspectives to help students develop a global mindset? How do we develop more internationally minded students who become more responsible global citizens when it comes to economics? uh, we could actually go in reverse this time and take it from the perspective of Zamzam from the UK. How do we, create globally minded students when it comes to teaching economics?
I feel like one of the key things is reading global news, and maybe as a starter, as the beginning of the lesson, having like a news article and discussing what is going on. Then hopefully, eventually, maybe they'll start coming in with their own articles that they've looked at about what's happening, and having open discussions of why certain things are happening. Could it affect our country differently? Yeah, I feel like news articles, global news articles would be the biggest thing. But I think you're
So,
mute. Yeah.
yes, I realize that. My apologies. Even after 3 years of teaching online during COVID, I still sometimes remain muted. Uh, if I were to conclude, your main recommendation would be that we should include as many news articles as possible to inform students of the other perspectives.
Yeah, so including it in, I guess, during the lesson, and them going outside of the lesson and finding out news.
All right. On the topic of news articles, just a question to keep in mind. I would also raise this later on about other forms of media that we can use to incorporate in our lessons. But for now, let's move to Mr. Solomon. How do we basically create internationally minded students and have students approach economics from a global mindset? So,
All right. Now, when we come to, I think what I can say that the Chinese educators, what they can do, especially here in Africa, Africa is sometimes cut off from the world. The only thing that they know much about Africa is the negative part of Africa. Mostly they talk about, if we talk about Africa, the world see Africa as a poverty-stricken environment. The world see Africa as the sick continent. But we've got a lot of good things, beautiful things here in Africa. There are some places that if you can open to the rest of the world, they will not even believe that is coming from Africa. So, like the previous educator said, we can expose the learners to what I've tried to use over here is there is this new meta AI that the learners can search from. I think it is also opening their mind to the rest of the world where they can search about Africa, for instance. If I can go to Africa, what are some of the good things that I can see? If I can go to Europe, for instance, what are the economic things that I can find over there? And if I can go to US, for instance, as we're doing this, then we bring in the mindset of these children to the rest of the world. We don't want to have a situation whereby an African will step into a classroom in China and all of the learners will start laughing because the person is black, for instance. So these are some of the things that we as educators, we have to start showing them. And I'm sure even some of these things that we're doing now, as you are recording, probably just five or 3 minutes before lessons, you can share it so that they can see that in US, we've got people like this who are economically minded in UK, for instance, and the rest. So we open them to that broader perspective by using the journals, as that person said, and also we can tell them by words of mouth because we are ahead of them and we are connected. Apart from all these things, maybe one of these days, if teachers in China are teaching something that has got something to do with Africa, for instance, they can just in a Zoom meeting like this. I'm always ready to stand in to explain everything that is happening here in terms of economics and also what they need to know about economics to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Solomon, and thank you so much for actually volunteering your time.
Thank you very much.
So,
thanks.
I would pose, before moving to Dr. Stephen, I would pose an open question. Creating resources in order to deliver proper instruction takes quite a bit of time, even if our hearts are in the right place. If you could also, in the background, think about how can we best create these resources and share these resources, that would be, we can bring it up in later discussions. So with that, moving to Dr. Stephen, how do we best create internationally minded students when it comes to economics?
Yeah, well, the first and most obvious way is to teach comparative advantage and interdependence and markets, because the first thing that you notice when you teach those things is that everybody needs each other. When you have a seller and a buyer, it's a two-sided deal. It's not one-sided. So there's no real thing as a position of strength if you're trying to make a mutually beneficial deal because both people need each other. So I mean, just with that as the overall mindset as you go through teaching economics, I mean, that helps us understand how interdependent we are. When we teach elementary school students, we do a fun little activity where you get a ball of yarn, ball of string, and you say, and everybody gets to make up a business that they're part of. You say, I'm a paper salesman and I need water for the office. And you take the ball of string and you throw it to somebody else and they catch it and they say, okay, I run a water company and we need software engineers to plan our systems. And you hold on to the string, toss it to someone else. And by the time you're done, you see the big web of interdependence between everybody. And I make the point at the end that this is just one person connected to one person for each transaction. In real life, we're connected with dozens of people each day. So our web of interdependence is extremely dense. And I use that to teach about markets too, is that a planner can't plan all this stuff. You need prices to coordinate markets to make this stuff go. I think that another answer to your question is that starting with the individual and moving outward, individual, household, community, nation, region, world, I mean, that's a good way to teach because it starts with what people know and then it moves on to the next thing, which they can envision once you are sort of, it's like moving on a ladder or expanding outward. So it's not necessarily bad to start with a local or an individual perspective, just so long as you expand it over time. And I think that's what all education does. And it's what economics education does in particular. Lastly, there's just ways that you can get students to interact with students from other countries or see examples of students from other countries. Exactly what you're doing right now, trying to connect people. This is exactly a tool for making this happen. One tool that I recommend is if you look up Gapmind or Dollar Street. You might all be familiar with Hans Robling's Gapminder presentation where he shows growth in countries over time. But Gapminder is a really good tool. They have the interactive graphs where you can look at countries change over time relative to their GDP per capita compared to other changes. But they also have a tool called Dollar Street. So again, Google Gapminder Dollar Street. And what they did is they went and interviewed families in many countries and took pictures of them and little videos of them and show where they live. They talk about how much money they have. Thank you, Sonny, for including that in the chat. And so I use that in an assignment lately where I had my students look at a particular country, how much they what their per capita income is, attach it, do a little report on a particular family in a particular country, maybe come up with an anecdote of a family that they know in another country, and just build lesson plans with lots of international examples. And you can do that either with students' personal experience if they have any international experience. And if they don't, then you can use Gapmind or Dollar Street or some other tool that lets them actually see people from other countries. And one more tool would be the lesson that I mentioned earlier, which does that as well with the letters and the report from the National Public Radio and so forth.
Got it. Thank you, Dr. Stephen. That was very illuminating. In fact, as you were talking, I was thinking in my mind, how do I include this in my sociology class? Because we are going to begin the unit on globalization after our Christmas break. So I also teach sociology together with economics. It helps me bring the sociological perspective. It really improves classroom discussions. So on the same question, it also reminded me of a resource I use in the classroom for our teachers here. It's called MIT's Observatory of Economic Complexity. And the name is self-explanatory. The MIT maintains this website called Observatory of Economic Complexity, and it helps us map how complex or complicated and interdependent are connections between different countries. So it helps us visualize just how complex the global economy is. And if we look at the volume of transactions, different kinds of transactions which are happening all across the board. I'll put that in the chat as well. But for now, in order to move on with this discussion, I'd go to Neha with the same question.
Yes, to answer this question, Sunny, to develop a global mindset, I would rather use the examples and the cross-country topic linkages. So, for example, in order to understand the economic systems, my example would be comparing, let's say, Norway's mixed economy with India's mixed economy. Wherein we know that Norway uses extensive government intervention to provide universal healthcare and pensions, while India blends the public as well as the private sector to tackle its diverse socioeconomic needs. So it would help the students to learn how cultural values and political ideologies influence the economic system. My next example could be, I mean, there is one a skill formation program which India is currently running, which is called Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. We can compare it with Germany's apprenticeship model, wherein Germany's dual education system integrates academic learning with vocational training, while India focuses on short-term skill development to boost employability. So it would help the students to in highlighting how tailored strategies address the youth employment and labor market inefficiencies in different economies. So these are my strategies to bring in the global mindset in the students.
All right. Thank you, Neha. Especially with that example from Germany, it's a very enviable education model in many countries, the apprenticeship model. So for the same question, we'll move on to our last panelist, Ms. Candy. How do we best create more internationally minded students when it comes to teaching, when it comes to economics?
I would go with country development and the transition. Because I think that is a topic where kids that you can even play a game, use a pair of scissors resources for trade to see why different country develop differently in different way. Why the low developing country, like a poor country, they tend to have a struggling in terms of country development, either due to poor infrastructure, either due to some restriction barriers, so either due to geographical barriers. So when those areas can give students a bit more open mindset that not only focus on their own country, but they rather looking at the global scale. So this way they can have a more mindset, more a better understanding of that certain country had a different developing pattern, but may not apply to every other country. Another good example I think I could use is when we're talking about the policies to reduce pollution, for example, like ocean pollution. It's not a problem with one particular country or particular city. Factories or business can move from city to another city or from a country to another country. But does pollution go away? Pollution will still existing, that this can be transferred from one country to another country. This always sometimes that this kind of open question can give students a bit more deeper thinking in terms of how government should do to reduce, like how like government should collaborate together, working together to address, for example, global warming is one of the popular topic that always come up in economics, right? How like over the world, how do we collaborate together to address global warming? It's not only up to one country's role and responsibility, but actually you are looking at a global scale. So these are some topic I found that is quite interesting, that if you want to have an open discussion. Another question could be something to do with like a poverty equality, whether how do a country reduce poverty, whether women, for example, should engage in whether women should engage in work, how the women's power has been increased over recent years in terms of employment. Again, those are also the topics that is very easy that students can link to themselves and also can looking at the different example from different country. I always use mind map. I think also mind map is a good way. If you can give students from like one topic, for example, reducing poverty from different country, assign students to different country, looking at how different country to reduce poverty, for example, they can come up with some examples. So based on those examples, you can put in together as a big mind map. Then they can see the big picture that different country have different policy to address this, and whether this policy may work in this country but may not work in another country. How high income country has different policy comparing to a no income country. This kind of open need discussion can give students a better understanding for to open their mind to a global scale rather than focus on a local economy.
Thank you, Miss Candy. That reminds me of the Nobel Prize in economics, I think last year, Claudia Golden, whose life's work was about labor market outcomes for women. For our audience, Miss Candy referred to an international trade game developed by John Sloman. It's a very standard international trading simulation that is used in most classrooms. Here it is in the chat. It simulates the inequitable distribution of resources all over the world and tells students how they can benefit from trade. It's a wonderful simulation to run in your class if you have an hour to spare. So, as we are bringing our discussion, we are now narrowing it down and bringing it to a close. If all of our panelists could give one thought that comes to their mind about how we can strengthen uh, collaboration among teachers in teaching economics. It could be in terms of a shared curriculum, or it could be in terms of shared resources. How would you recommend we can best go about doing that? For example, if the NEC were to decide that we want to create a shared platform to bring in more events like this, how would you how would you recommend we best do it? If you could share uh, some thoughts. I think we have 1 minute each for every panelist so that we can have a few minutes for live questions. And for our uh, audience members, if you'd like to ask questions, you can message me those questions in the chat. Sorry, you can message me those questions via private message, and I'll raise it here. So this time we can begin again with Dr. Stephen.
This is a tricky one. Well, the first thing you should do is have your students participate in the economics challenge, in the econ challenge. And I know that 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 all of my Chinese friends over there on this call probably do that already. So good job. You're on the right track. And I think though that I this call that we're on that you've put together is the perfect way to start. It's the perfect first step. And we should keep on doing things like this. I think that teachers might be tempted to maybe have their students just connect with students from another country via Zoom or something during econ class. I think that might be boring. I think that one thing that we don't have that we might need to do is make a lesson plan with some interesting interaction between classrooms or in different countries, either synchronously or asynchronously. I don't know of a really good tool that exists for that yet. So it would take, I think, if somebody out there wants to make a neat synchronous lesson plan or asynchronous lesson plan that gets the students talking to each other and sharing perspectives, then that's what we need. So good question. I don't know.
All right, thank you, Dr. Stephen. And yeah, we also believe that this kind of a platform is a very good beginning. And Econ Ed link that you've been sharing is, to me, a very good way of collaboration as well. So every year we attend the AP Summer Institute hosted by St. Louis Federal Reserve. A large part of that AP Summer Institute is Econ Ed, where they talk about different lesson plans that we can use using Econ Ed. So it is definitely a tool that one of the most widely used tools, especially in an AP classroom in China. I can vouch for that.
Sonny, one more thing real fast that I didn't mention.
Yes.
That the Global Economics Educators Alliance that I'm a part of, GEA, GEEA,
Yes.
right now, I mean, it's American professors reaching out to other countries and sending study tours of Americans to other countries. It should go both ways more. So we had been talking in our board meetings lately about maybe if we had international board members or if we accepted study tours or professional trades to the United States from other countries. That would be good. So yeah, GEEA, GEA, Global Economic Educator Alliance, has some really internationally minded American professors who are interested in collaborations. I know some Germans and some Finns as well. So I know there's some people out there.
On that note, a sizable number of students from China travel to the US every year to participate in the NEC Nationals in New York City. And as you were speaking, the wheels of thought were turning. It could be an extension of their travel to the US could be an activity organized by the GEAA. I'll forward it to well, Marcus is the bigger authority here. I'll forward it to him at the end of this session.
Thank you.
All right. So let's move to Mr. Solomon.
All right, no, thank you very much. Like Dr. Stephen said, you guys are doing it very well, and I think you've given a good spike to all of us to just stand on to jump to a different perspective. Like he said, I think it is the best thing you guys have started well. But what we need to do is also to strengthen each other. Keep on. This thing should be continuous. I don't know how often you do this, since that's why sometimes I don't want to talk that much because I'm still new to this. So if you can be having this from time to time, and as Dr. Stephen also suggested, we've got people all over the world. I mean, we peg them like here in Africa. I'm going to take over as it is, and then I'll bring more people on board. That side, they bring more people. When we meet. And also, if we can get leaders across the world, like we've got leaders here in Asia, we've got leaders in America, we've got leaders in Africa, so that when we meet like this, they can also disperse any information that we've got from this platform to the rest of the educators, because I believe it's not everybody who will be able to link up with us like this, but we should get people to spread the news out there. I think that will also strengthen the collaboration. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Solomon. We can move on to closing thoughts from Ms. Zamzam.
It's quite difficult because I'm trying to figure out how to connect with other UK economics teachers. So I think one thing is maybe having similar to this, but a CPD sessions where I guess different panelists, I don't know, once every few months can introduce the way they teach, because all of you guys had really great ideas. So teaching that to other teachers would be a great way to learn from each other. So it's specifically just CPD. And maybe, I guess, small scale, having maybe a shared Google Doc where we can just put links that we find interesting or something like that. I don't know if that's helpful.
Actually, it was very helpful. This session aside, one of the most common ways in which we meet teachers from other countries is actually CPD organized by CAIE or edXL. edXL CPDs are very popular here. Teachers get certified to teach edXL economics. So that is actually one of the ways in which we have whatever limited interaction we have. So as the penultimate panelist, we'll move to Ms. Neha. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Sunny, to be very honest, this is my first collaboration like this. And last year, our students actually participated in the global round of NEC in Hong Kong. So that was my first collaboration internationally. And I'm really, really happy. And I mean, I am learning a lot from this. So personally, if you ask me, I would definitely would like to be a part of international collaborations like this, whether it is online or offline or in person. I mean, and I would request, SKT committee to organize more events like this. And if they can be in person, they would be more helpful. Apart from this, I think we should create a pool or a link wherein we all can drop our resources, which may benefit each one of us. So that may be done in order to enhance the collaboration between amongst the international teachers.
So on that note, if any of our audiences teaches AP economics, the AP teacher community run by College Board within AP Classroom is a wonderful resource with it's almost like a living document where we have PPTs going back 18 years, and you could for almost anything you could find resources in there. I'm not sure if other curriculums offer something similar, but for AP, the AP teacher community is an amazing resource. So we will wrap up this question on current collaboration and future collaboration with Ms. Candy's comments, and then very quickly conclude the panel, and then open the floor to questions.
I actually had a experience of collaboration with other teachers during the competition of in IEO. I think one thing we could do is like, because the students normally get like, depending on is for students or teachers. Students are normally taught by their own teachers. It's very good experience for them to learn from other different teachers as well. So if there is a project that teacher can choose the topic they're comfortable to teach for a particular topic and that they're really good at. So spreading the topic around the different panels or different teachers, so they can sharing that experience of how they approach that topic. That can actually give them a very good learning experience from different perspective. And for teachers, they could also do the same thing, that in selecting a different topic for teachers, because I also delivered some PD for teacher training as well. Particularly, you can look at a different perspective, the way the teaching methodology, the examination scale. You can split in those different teaching methodology, examination scale, how we prepare for competition. So there's a variety of topic that the teacher, again, can feel comfortable to choose the topic. Then we can participate into a series of events rather than just one of them. So this can actually give a bit more beneficial to the people who participate.
All right. So at least that brings us to the end of active discussion in this panel. If I could very quickly conclude based on some notes that I've been taking. We talked a lot about how we can use different cross-country examples, the most common one of them being different policy environments, because we teach not we teach a lot of general information about government policy, and having different examples of policies from different countries is a very good way of contextualizing it. We had examples of different policies, for example, UPI from India, and we had examples of existence of resources, but not enough capacity to convert those resources into productive investments in Africa from Mr. Solomon. And we had examples of students understanding how labor markets work and students understanding how manufacturing works in different countries from Dr. Steven. So all of those were very good examples. And I'm pretty sure a lot of our audience members also found the questions, the discussion to be fulfilling. For now, we are actually at the allotted end of our time period, but I will still open the floor to questions in case any of our audience members would like to engage with any of our panelists here. All right. So now, even though this panel was composed of national educators, I would raise the same questions to all of our audience as well. So one of the questions we got in the chat was, dear guests, do you have any experience on building a cross-border education program, and how would you run such programs across the world? Which is something, a topic that we touched upon, but since we got it as an explicit question, if any of our panel members would like to address it, I can repeat the question. Dear guests, do you have any experiences on building a cross-border education program, and how to best run such a program across the world? As The question is broad, but if any of our panelists would like to take a stab at it.
I did have the opportunity to do a research project and create an assessment with some German professors. And we wrote a research paper about it, which I'll put here. That's a humongous link. Sorry about that. Um, it's in the chat. Excuse me. Anyway, so basically, the Germans from the University of Mainz, Johannes Gutenberg University Mainz, they wanted to do a better job training their teachers to teach economics. And so they made a video-based training test whereby they would show a classroom situation to a teacher, and the teacher would have to show how they would fix that teaching situation in real life and in real time, which meant to do this test, the teachers needed to have a little microphone on, like what Taylor Swift would have when she does her concerts, and they needed to talk while they saw this classroom teaching situation. Germans wanted to know if they could expand this test to the United States because they would use this test to train their teachers. And so they did a translation to English. I applied it to classrooms, and it was difficult. One reason is because, as you mentioned earlier, there's different education systems. So sometimes when we taught economics, the standards lined up, but sometimes they didn't. And so we had to cut out a lot of the questions that did not apply. So that was one challenge, is making sure your curriculum's aligned. Another is just sort of educational traditions. Their academic tradition was a bit different. And and then lastly, they have, since they start their education, since they track students earlier, your students are at different levels at different times. So we had these sort of international sort of tensions. And one thing that was interesting and kind of sad is that when an American teacher couldn't do the test very well, they tended to kind of lean on cultural stereotypes about Germans. They'd say this is the way that Germans are, and they're very strict, and they don't have very creative lesson plans and things like that, which was not a good interpretation, but it was just sort of a person who felt bad about themselves in the moment, that they were supposed to be they they felt like their teaching ability was not being well recognized. So that was a collaboration that we started for training teachers. And there were kind of these additional kind of system level things that needed to be adjusted in order to make the thing work really well. So that's one experience that I have.
Just a second.
It definitely showed the need. It definitely showed the need for international collaboration, because it showed that there were some tensions and roadblocks and some bumps that you need to smooth out to make it work well.
Very informally, it's something that we have also experienced here. For example, we host a lot of not professors, but we host a lot of educational consultants, primarily from the United States, over for IB workshops, for AP workshops. And in my experience, some of the best presenters, they understand the local educational context first before before they train. And we have experienced people who have tried to bring like a bring over a pedagogical model for it not to be effective in a Chinese classroom, because our students have different background knowledge and different skills. And for that educational model or pedagogical model not to work, only for them to remark, oh, well, I don't think you're doing it right. And we have had similar experiences quite a lot. As an example, most Chinese students study economics very late in their educational career. Grade 11, grade 10, grade 9 is rare. Only full service K through 12 international schools do grade 9. And 11th and 12th are the most common ones. while a lot of students from the US and other countries, they start learning economics very early. So uh, for our students here, the the curriculum is, they basically jumpstart learning economics. They don't have years of onboarding with the curriculum that they can use to study advanced concepts later on. So a lot of pedagogical methods that rely on them having knowledge of economics from grade 7th, 8th, and 9th and 10th, basic understanding of the markets and things like that a lot of that wholesale import of pedagogy fails there. So I do understand the need for more informed global collaboration, so that uh, experienced teachers can share their expertise, which is contextualized the context of the teachers that they're teaching, rather than a one-to-one import of the teaching model. But again, uh, if I may, that sounds like a wonderful topic for another future panel discussion on pedagogical best practices.
All right.
Right.
If I may come in there, I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I said from the beginning, I'm originally a Ghanaian, and I got to
Yes.
South Africa. Then when I got to the classroom, I saw that we've got differences. The way we learn economics in Ghana and the way they learn economics in South Africa, and teaching pedagogy and everything, there was a vast difference. So what I decided to do, since when you want to catch the people, you have to study the culture. So the first thing that I decided to do is to get to understand the people and try to know what and how to give them in terms of teaching and learning. So what I adapted to, I realized that, here in South Africa, you have to teach everything in stories. You have to make everything practical. You do anything abstract, you don't get anybody at all. And I also realized that most of the teachers have adapted to the abstract method of teaching. So economics inadvertently was dead here in South Africa. So what I decided to do, this is what put me in the rest of the world. It put me on the map at that time. I decided to adapt different strategies of teaching different topics. One of the ways, if I may just give an example, is when I'm teaching inflation, for instance, I don't go straight to inflation in terms of money. I approach inflation in terms of a story, like the use of a pregnant woman to explain inflation. Then I will use that thing. I remember in 2008, when I got to a new school, they were not having a teacher and they were about to write the end of year exam. So I was under pressure and I used this thing. And I remember one young man, when he was about to write economics, he came to me in the office and he said I should keep his phone for him, for instance. Then I asked him, are you ready for the exam? He said, no, I'm writing Afrikaans, because he was an Afrikaner. So he said, no, we're writing Afrikaans today, so I don't have to get ready for Afrikaans. It's my home language. I was shocked and I didn't know how to do anything at that time. So I told this young man, no, you're writing economics. Then he wanted to go home because how they don't like economics and he did not prepare for economics. But I asked him a few questions. Do you remember anything that I've taught you in economics? He said no. And I was very hurt. But I asked him the second question, do you remember any story that I've told you in economics class before? Surprisingly, he remembered all the stories, but he did not remember anything I've taught him. But, he managed to link all the stories to the topics and he passed economics. So these are some of the things that we can employ when you're doing this cross-country policies. You need to know the people and you need to know how to give them and what to give them in any way. So I think that is one of the things that we can adapt also as we're moving forward on this platform. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Solomon, for helping us finish the panel discussion on that anecdote. I see that we are about 12 minutes past our allotted time. And for all of us in China, it's 9:45, close to 9:45. I can imagine it's very early in the morning for Dr. Stephen. So
I'm ready
this
for
brings us
breakfast.
to the Well, I'm ready to feed my cat. So this brings us to the end of uh, a very fulfilling panel discussion. I'm On behalf of the organizing committee and all of our audience, I'd like to thank all of our panel members for taking the time out of their schedule and helping us create this shared understanding that we can take forward. Uh, I would hand over to Marcus for any closing announcements, and then we can wrap up the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, dear all guests. Thank you for tonight's time, and thank you for your profound and deep insights. And thank you for joining our econ think tank. And I want to also thank Sunny, our moderator, and also our audiences to take the time to join us tonight. And we'll be beside this tonight's panel talk, we'll be having several other events, online events, panel talk or some other sharings coming up in the next few months. And so please stay tuned to our accounting deck. And thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you. Have a good day or night.
I have saved the transcript of our chat with all of the resources. I will forward it to our respective emails.
Thank you.
All right. With that, in another minute or so, I'll end this meeting. If there is any final questions addressed to me, otherwise I would hand over to Marcus so we could end this meeting.
Is there a way where we will, because the point was to stay connected, right? So is there a way
Yes.
like through LinkedIn or anything else, how we stay connected to each other?
So I'm fine with staying connected on LinkedIn. I can actually drop my LinkedIn profile in the chat. Email is preferred.
Yes, I believe we also have a WhatsApp group, and maybe we can share our information.
Yes.
Yeah, in the WhatsApp group, and also maybe our LinkedIn pages.
Here you go. This is I drop my LinkedIn in the chat.
Yes.
All right. So if there are no further questions and all of us had a good time, I would end this session, and we can stay connected in our WhatsApp group and via email or any other method.
Thank you. And I also look forward to meeting everyone here offline, face to face in the future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hoping to
Right.
very soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you,
See you,
everyone.
everybody.
All right. Bye.
Mm.
好了，我来解决问题了。啥？听众找我干啥呢？哦，我要给谁回电话？喂喂，哎，Harry，嗯，对对，作弊名单我们是给了的，就是那个行为异常的那个名单，我们其实已经给掉了。对，分区域的也给了。对对对对对对。稍等，我把 Zoom 先关了。